So, good afternoon to all distinguished guests. Moving on with the next session, I would like to call our eminent Smriti Rajput Shraddha Bosing, who is the Assistant Professor in the Department of Law, Vidyapura National Law University, Raipur, Chhattisgarh, India. So, she will present the paper, The Fundamental Duties and its Significance in Preserving Composite Culture in India, or a critical analysis. So, ma'am, with that, I would like to hand to you to proceed the session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so greetings to all, and thank you, Mr. Roderick Mario, for such a warm welcome. And in fact, it has always been an honor for me by whatever initiatives and endeavors which are brought in by the Cape Cameron Trust. I start my session. I would also compliment President Dr. Arias Revin Selvist, Cape Cameron Trust, and Shillong Law College, and all conveners and members of this 3-day international conference on multidisciplinary socio-economic and cultural studies for this wonderful conference and for inviting me to chair this session. I believe for this session we have 3 papers presenters on versatile subject matter. I request to all the paper presenter to keep the time frame in the mind for paper presentation. So I would request you to please speak about the crux of your paper, the rationale of your paper in presentation, so that at the end we can take up the questions and I would comment on that and we can have a fruitful discussion by giving my own ideas to the concept. So the first paper presenter is Dhirendra Nevar. He's a PhD research scholar, Faculty of Law, Guwahati University, Assam, and the title of the paper is Penal Provision Relating to E-Waste Pollution in India, a Legal Analysis. The title of the paper seems to be quite interesting. I request you, Mr. Dhiren Nevar, to please present your paper. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, Dhiren, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So before proceeding into my paper, share this screen. Ma'am, is my paper is shared in the screen, ma'am?
Yes, yes, it is visible. Your slide is visible.
Okay. So, hello everyone. A very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Dhirendra Nawar. I am a PhD research scholar in Faculty of Law, Guwahati University. So, the title of my paper is Penal Provisions Relating to EU Pollution in India, a Legal Analysis. So, before going into the contents of my paper, I would like to just make it out clear that what I will be dealing is that I'll be basically dealing with the nature of the e-waste, the definitions of the e-waste, the various effects the e-waste that can generate in the environment or the human health as well, and obviously the legal provisions that are there in India in order to tackle these e-waste pollution, and also to check whether there are some flaws in the existing laws or there or not, and to give some suggestions if at all is there. So with this short note, I would like to proceed to the next slide. So electronic waste, as we all know, like before going into that, I would like to just mention that we are, from morning till night, we are being surrounded with the electronic devices or electronic equipment. Like right now, also we are communicating with each other with the help of these electronic devices only. So, but the fact of the matter is that these electronic devices or these electronic products have their own lifespan, limited lifespan, beyond which they become an waste product only, a good waste product only. So, however, the major distinction between this waste product and other waste product, other domestic waste product is that these waste products, these electronic waste products, they contain various toxic and hazardous and subhazardous elements and elements which make these products very, very harmful and very, very toxic to the environment as well as the human health. And this makes these products a very much dangerous environmental killer. So coming to the next slide, we would like to see what types of, what are the various types or what are the various kinds of UAs that are there that we produce in day-to-day life. So you can see that like from laptops to laptops and monitors to various personal electronic devices like the mobile phones, audio-visual equipment, scanners, printers, televisions, various mouse, keyboards, all these products that we use in daily life. They are, without these products, maybe many of the works that we do nowadays are not going to happen. So these are basically very much good electronic equipment or very much useful electronic equipment. But beyond their lifespan, beyond the validity, beyond their validity is gone. These are very much a worst product, which are very much harmful to the nature, to the environment. So with this, we would like to see what are the various sources of the UAs that are there, that these UAs are being generated from. So you can see that there are various sources of UAs like these. From our home itself, we produce various many kinds of these UAs products. Many times we say that many times we do not do intentionally we do not do any kind of environmental degradation in work, but by keeping our cell phone or by keeping some hazardous these equipment in our home, also we are directly or indirectly we are harming the environment basically. So at home also you can see that the various equipment like PCs, televisions, radios, cell phones, washing machines, etc. All these products which are very, very from the name itself you can see that these are very, very important products or very, very important equipment for the day-to-day life. So these are there, and in other institutions like hospitals, like government institutions, like private sectors, etc. And all these fields, you can see that there are various electronic devices which are very, very we are very much aware of this, or we every now and then we see these products. However, the fact of the matter is that we do not know what happens to these products after their lifespan is gone. So, for example, like 5 years or 10 years maximum, they have their lifespan. So, what happens after that? So, this is what I'm going to discuss here. But basically, I will not be dealing with the management sector of this UAs. What I will be dealing with is the legal provisions that are there in order to tackle this UAs basically. So with this, I would like to go to the next slide, which talks about some definitions of UAs. So there are various institutions which have given various definitions of UAs, like the European Union Directive, one of the directives by the European Union has given the definition of UAs. It says that UAs is an electronic or electrical equipment which is a waste including all components, assemblies, and consumables which are part of the product at the time of discarding. So, with the same tone, this UAs Management Rule 2016, which has been enacted by the Parliament of India, it has also given one definition of UAs. It says that UAs is any electrical or electronic equipment, whole or in part, discarded as waste by the consumers or bulk consumers, as well as reject from manufacturing, refurbishment, and repair processes. So there is also another institution which is solving the UAs problem. This is basically an institution which deals with the management of the or tackling with this UAs pollution in India. It has also given one definition, that is, it says that UAs is a term used to cover items of all types of electrical and electronic equipment and its parts that have been discarded by the owner or as waste without the intention of reuse. So basically, what we can understand is that these UAs basically are those products which have no value to their product whatsoever, and they have no value to the owner, and they have been discarded by the owner without the intention of reuse. Basically, so this is what the UAs basically means. So coming to the problem profile, I would like to discuss there are various studies which have tried to quantify what are the amounts of US that we generate here in India, particularly, and in the global level also in general. So there is various studies, and one of them is EXCOCHAM, which is basically means the Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry of India. It, along with Kinetics, has done one joint study in the year 2016, and it found that there are around 52 lakh metric tons of metric tons, or 5.2 like a million metric tons of US are being generated in India annually in India itself. So there is also one another study done by United Nations Environment Program in the year 2014, and it found that there are around 62 million tons of US has been generated globally in 2014 itself. And the same study has also like done one study about India also, and it found that around 8 lakh tons of US has been generated in India only. However, it has only taken into consideration only three equipment, that is television set, cellular phones, and personal computers. So, these figures that they have given is only from the three equipment only, that is TV, cellular phone, and personal computer. So we can understand that the scenario of US pollution in not only in India but in the global as well is a very dangerous, and in a very dangerous situation basically. So with this, like to move upon the various the constituents of US. What causes the US or the electronic waste so toxic or so hazardous to nature? So you can say that see in the slide that the US components, basically it has various components or elements, like it contains various toxic elements like lead, like barium and other heavy materials, mercury, and the PCBs, etc., and which are very harmful to the nature. We can see in the third column and the fourth column also, like various environmental as well as human health effects are also given. So we'll again see it rightly in the next slide. That is the effects of US on the environment is been like done in many ways, like emission from the US create environmental damage. So there are, as I have already mentioned, that there are many like toxic and hazardous elements that are present in the this electronic products, discarded electronic products. So when they are being discarded in the open landfills or open discarded yards, yards, etc. So they have a tendency to damage the or create the air pollution when it rain comes, and the water percolates only the toxic elements into the earth and soil, and then it also causes the soil pollution. It also causes the water pollution. And I have also mentioned about the soil, crop, and food parcels. That basically means is that when these toxic elements are carried away, which by these by rain and all, and when they are leached into the earth or the soil, so they damage the crop, the nearby crop areas, and when these elements like they enter into the crops and all, and they also when human consume that crop, they also get transmitted to the human food chain system as well. So it has thereafter it will create many health problems as well in the in the human health as well. However, the most negative thing about it is that these products are non-biodegradable. So this makes these products very harmful to the nature. You can also see that elements that are there like lead, chromium, cadmium, mercury, etc., which are present in this electronic waste. They are very harmful to the human body area. Like you can see here, like they can damage to the central and the peripheral nervous system, blood system, and they can affect the brain of brain development of children, okay, and asthmatic problems, etc. So many problems due to US pollution can create in system. So with this harmful effect, we'd like to go to the next slide to talk about the various laws that are there in India in order to prevent the piling up of this US pollution in India. So basically, we have this Constitution of India, basically, which is the law of the land of our country. Now there are various provisions, as you all know, like Article 21 talks about life and personal liberty. like the Honorable Supreme Court has said categorically said in many of the judgments that clean environment is also one of the basic components of Article 21. Likewise, Article 48A talks about the responsibility of the state to protect the environment, wildlife, etc.
Mr. Dhirendra,
And
sorry to interrupt you. You have 2 minutes remaining, okay? So try to sum up the thing.
okay. I'll be going first. So the Environment Protection Act is also there. There are various provisions like Section 15, 16, 17, which gives various the Section 15 gives various like penalties like 5 days of imprisonment or 1 lakh of rupees, 1 lakh of rupees of fine, etc. The basically the direct legislation dealing with US pollution is US Management Rule 2016, which has been enacted under this Environment Protection Act. So the US Management Rule has a total of 6 chapters, which are the most important chapter is the responsibility chapter. To the it talks about various responsibility of the manufacturers, producers, collection centers, dealers, etc. of these electronic products. And also it also talks about the responsibility. There in the last you can see that Rule 24 talks about the responsibility of the or the duty of the urban local bodies also. So it has also created one the liability of the urban local bodies to take or to prevent the sewage accumulation in their localities basically. However, you can see that like the fact that the electronic this sewage pollution has been growing up year after year, so we can very much question the applicability or implementation of these laws basically. So coming to the critical analysis of the US laws, so we can see that the Environment Protection Act, though it talks about some penalties, however, these penalties are not very stringent or strict basically. And also the imprisonment, it says that the imprisonment is only extendable up to. So that means the many lower punishment can also, or penalty can also be imposed for a very degrading nature of environmental effects. So also there is a direct cognizance of an offense. In order to give a cognizance of an offense under this Environmental Protection Act, then one person has to first of all give a 60 days notice to the central government. Then only you can file a complaint for the magistrate. So this is one of the major flaws of these laws. So this US Management Rule has also some flaws like.
Your time is up. Can you just sum up now?
Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. So this US Management Rule has also many flaws like the informal sectors, which are the sector which are dealing with the US stating sectors or US management sector in India. They are not given any adequate place in this law basically. So coming to the next slide, so I would like to give some suggestions in order to prevent this US pollution. The imports of US should be strictly prevented. The developed countries that try to export these US from their countries to the developing countries, including India, so that should be prevented. And the integration of the informal sector with the formal sector, so that all the benefits of the formal sector can be given to the informal sector also. Also, the awareness programs should also be carried out in a larger scale within these US things, and also promoting research, particularly legal research in the area of the US is also should also be promoted. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dhiren. It was a very well presented paper, and I would now call upon the next paper presenter, Miss Ishraz Ahmed, PhD research scholar, Department of Law, Sikkim University. The title of the paper is Alternative Models of Common Civil Code and Exercise in Pragmatism. Okay, over to you, Ishraz Ahmed.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. So, my paper is Alternative Models of Common Civil Code and Exercise in Pragmatism. When the Constitution of India came into force, it came with a vision. The vision is embodied in the preamble of the Constitution, which constitutes India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and all the citizens shall be secured justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation. So the constitutional vision of the country has been one where moral values are held high and whose strength is the people and their unity. So, the Constitution provision for the Uniform Civil Code is there in Article 44 of the Constitution. It states that the state shall seek to bring a uniform civil code for all its people. According to this article, the state must formulate a uniform civil code which will apply to everyone in India equally. This article is one of the directive principles of state policy, which is a part of our constitution. It imposes a positive responsibility on the state to establish a uniform civil code for all the Indians throughout the territory of India. Now, although this article is not enforceable through the courts of law, yet it is a fundamental no time limit that has been laid for the implementation of this directive principle of state policy by the makers of the Constitution. This was provided because the members wanted the wounds of partition to heal up and the country to be prepared for a change in the personal laws. The problem that often arises regarding the Uniform Civil Code is that it is believed it might result in being tyrannical to the minority. But for this, a good point had been made by a member of the drafting committee in the Constituent Assembly, Shri K.M. Munshi. He had argued back then that in none of the advanced Muslim countries, the personal law of a minority had been given such sacrosanct position as to prevent the enactment of the Uniform Civil Code. He had given examples of Turkey and Egypt and stated that none of the minorities in these countries are allowed to have such rights. He also pointed out that the Khojas and Kachri Memons were dissatisfied when the Shariat Act was passed because they were following customs similar to the Hindus since they became Muslims. They were not willing to conform to the Shariat Act, but by a legislation of the central legislature, some Muslim members who wanted Shariat law to be enforced upon the whole community could make their bill effective. If we want to consolidate a community, we have to take into account the benefits which may come to the whole community and not just a part of it. It will not be right to say that such an act is tyranny by the majority. He drew our attention to the countries in Europe which have a civil code. Everyone who goes there from any part of the world and all minorities have to submit to the civil code over there. The minority does not consider this a tyranny over there. So the question was whether to consolidate or unify our personal laws in a manner that the life of the entire country may in course of time be unified and secular. Religion should be separated from law and from what may be called social relation or rights of parties in respect of inheritance and succession and other such rights. Not having a civil code in the country has created a number of problems. For instance, the law of Mayukha applies in some parts of India and Mitakshara in others. The law of Dayabhaga applies in Bengal. Hence, among the Hindus as well, different schemes of law are applied in different states. This is not just a question of minority, but it has its effect on the majority as well. There are many Hindus who do not like or want a uniform civil code. It is believed by them that their personal laws of inheritance and succession are a part of their religion. If that is maintained, then equality to women cannot be achieved, but a fundamental right to that effect has already been granted for them. In an article which states that there should be no gender-based discrimination, but Hindu law and Muslim law contain discriminations against women, and if this is a part of religion or religious practice, no law can be passed to elevate the position of women. So therefore, there is no logical reasoning why there should not be a civil code throughout the territory of India. After the Supreme Court judgment of the Shah Banu case, important attempts were made to formulate a uniform civil code. The main reason for this draft code was to introduce uniformity in the diverse laws in order to enhance state authority over civil marriages concerning minorities. Although there was a claim of gender equality, some of the suggestions in the proposed draft were different from this claim. They accepted the idea of formal equality, which is often inimical to women's rights. The approach towards equality has to be a substantive one and not just a formal notion of equality. However, one of the problems that arise with the framing of the Uniform Civil Code is the lack of clarity on this matter. Article 44 of the Constitution just mentions the idea of the code, but it does not give any information on its details. Questions like should it just include the provisions governing marriage, divorce, inheritance, guardianship, or should it also include the discriminatory Hindu undivided family tax provisions are unanswered. The law and customary practices in the country vary so much within the same religious group itself, and rites and rituals differ from one place to another. Like, for example, practice of the south are different from that of the north, and those of the west are different from those of the east and northeast. These differences result in unacceptance of a uniform code. Another issue which might come up in this process is that the personal laws of some of the communities like Nagas and Hindus, etc., are entitled to constitutional as well as political protection. Thus, implementing a civil code will also mean making a number of constitutional amendments for this purpose. Without a proper uniform code, there exist gray areas between the various personal laws and the judgments passed by the court. Very often they are contrary to one another and in turn becomes a source of problem for the parties. To solve this, the people who are of the view that in the difficulties evident in the enactment of the Uniform Civil Code, the relevant course would be for the communities to undertake and come up with a thorough internal initiative in which the relevant aspects of their personal laws, which seem to be in conflict with the constitutional provisions and very often do not pass the test of equity, justice, and good conscience, a doctrine of Roman law followed in India, should be discarded as practices. This would be apt as every community would be in a place to uphold its distinctiveness along with making necessary changes in its governing system. Many of the problems regarding discrimination, discrepancy, and inequality in the personal laws probably could be solved by enacting a common civil code instead of a uniform one, which would be applicable to every person in the country. But if the problem was this simple, the solution would have perhaps come in the 1950s after the commencement of the Constitution, as it was promised under the Article 44 of the Constitution. India is a unity in diversity. It is multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious country. The traditions, customs, mores, and ethos of people in different parts of the country not only vary widely but are also heterogeneous and even contradictory. Therefore, any one of the following models can be suggested for enacting a common civil code. I have suggested just a few models which we may consider if we want a common civil code anytime soon. So one is that there may be a common civil code for the family matters, compulsorily applicable to all citizens regardless of their race, religion, caste, or place of birth. Or what we can do is there may be a common civil code in family matters applicable to all citizens regardless of their race, religion, caste, or place of birth if they opt for it by a declaration before the prescribed authority in this regard. Or another option could be that the different personal laws can be allowed to operate subject to the constitutional provisions relating to equality and anti-discrimination and international human rights standards contained in the International Human Rights Instrument. Or the last one is that all personal laws can be allowed to remain in operation subject to amendments to be made through legislation where there is violation or basic human rights or gender injustice. The personal laws can be allowed to operate as they exist, and the government and the state can directly or indirectly induce, encourage, and promote reforms in the personal laws from within each system. That's it. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Miss Ishraj, you're not audible.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm done presenting.
Okay. So thank you, Miss Ishraj, for your wonderful presentation. Now, I call upon the next paper presenter, Mr. Rahul Kishnani.
Is he there, present? I call upon the next paper presenter, Mr. Rahul Kishnani. Is he present? I call upon the next paper presenter, Mr. Rahul Kishnani. Am I audible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think he may join after some time. So let me continue with the comment session, as there are no questions. If anyone has any question, they can pose it in the comment box. Are there any questions for Dhirendra and Ms. Ishraz? So I can't find any question in the chat box. So let me continue or let me comment on both of the presenters. They have presented the paper in a very good way. To Mr. Dhirendra, I would say I have dealt with the subject, that is international environmental law, and I came across so many things which are related to e-waste. So he has tried his level best to research on a particular topic, and a critical analysis which he has brought in is very beneficial for everyone to think on a line that environment is really one of the major things which is not limited to the boundaries, but it is covering majority of the globe. Okay, so I would just say that Dhirendra can work on certain things which are related to the aspects that are which I don't find in his research, is with regard to developing countries and disposal of e-waste in that context. So I hope that he would take a note of this thing. Otherwise, his presentation was very good and very informative. Now coming to Ishraz, she has touched a very good topic, I would say, the topic which talks about a uniform civil code, on where we have seen so many discussion is not going since now, but we have experienced whatever is there with regard to such topics since the past. So what we propose, or what she has added, her 2 points of the conclusion or suggestions, I really appreciate a lot when talking about the families, or how to incorporate certain things that are related with this code will really change the mindset of the people with regard to this particular point. Okay, so these are my comments with regard to both the papers, and I need to add something from my side also. Okay, so today, as from morning, we are hearing so many things which are related to different aspects, okay, that are in concern with the cultural aspects or economic aspects or other points which are covered. And before some time, we have also seen that SK Bose sir have covered certain points that are related to culture and law. I need to add something to those particular points, but I'm not just going to highlight something that is related to culture, but I need to speak something that is related mostly with the term composite culture. So here I would just say that when I talk about composite culture, okay, so if you go to most of the historians, they bring Indian culture in a synthetic manner. They say that it has a synthetic nature or character, okay, which comprehends different ideas, orders. They embraces orbit beliefs, customs, rights, institutions, and religion and philosophies. But I don't limit myself in talking only about culture, but I proceed further with that. Okay, so I just talk about one particular aspect, and that aspect is of composite culture. Now, a question should always arise in our mind, that what is composite culture? Because culture's definition, again, I say it will differ from person to person, it will differ from generation to generation, it will differ from boundaries to boundaries. Okay, so one cannot entangle something that is or that can be brought under one head, that is culture. Okay, so proceeding further from that particular definition or that particular term, I need to talk about composite culture. What does it mean? Okay, so see, if I need to just elaborate that particular term, I would say it's a cultural or culture drawn from various trends. Okay, so what it defines is the fusion or amalgamation of the different cultures and traditions. Okay, so there can be a new or distinct cultural tradition which can take birth from the composition of different culture. Okay, so let me talk about the contemporary era we all see around. Okay, what we found in today's modern text or in today's modern views, we can see so many things around us which talks about different aspect, different cultures. Okay, let me give you an example of this thing. Joint family structure, we all have experienced. Diversities in festivals, clothing, cuisine, dialects, okay, traditions, customs, music and dance are nothing but the example of the composite culture. Okay, why I say this thing? Because previously one was limited to the community. Okay, you would see that people were very distinct in celebrating the festivals. Also at a particular region you will find that some people used to celebrate certain kinds of festivals. Okay, and at other region you will see the same thing was not that much followed, but the things have completely changed now. Okay, why I say that the things have completely changed now? Because you will not find a particular festival limited to a particular area. Okay, or a particular culture. Why? Because everyone needs to follow this particular composite culture. Okay, let me talk about one more thing. Okay, I always, whenever I'm in my class, I always give my student this example that, see, whenever we talk about the composite culture, previously a particular kind of a food was limited to a particular group of people, but today we don't do that thing. Okay, you will see most of the people belonging from either north or either south, they don't hesitate, to take they, they don't hesitate to just there's a technical glitch. Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. See, what I say, previously we were limited to one particular culture. Okay, you will see a specific group of people follow certain things which were specifically enjoyed by themselves. Like I tell you, people from north would prefer mostly a particular kind of food, may it be chole bhature or something. Okay, but now the things are not limited to this thing. They prefer to eat South Indian dishes, they prefer to eat something that is completely different. Okay, what this is an example where we are talking about the composite culture. Okay, so what I feel that we need to talk more about it. We need to talk more about it. There is a reason behind that. What is that particular reason? Because previously people were when I talk about our own culture, our culture was very organic in nature. Why I say organic in nature, you know, because it used to inculcate in itself so many things which were all around. Okay, but what is there, you know, day by day we are losing that particular thing. Okay, I don't say ki completely that thing has been vanished, but you can find certain glimpses that people are becoming more sensitive when the question comes to culture. Okay, I say specific group of people. Still, I believe that youth will always break something that would be very pleasant or that would be very revolutionary. Okay, so you cannot bound the youth in that context. Okay, and keeping this particular thing in mind, there was one more thing which was added in this context. You know what was that particular thing? We added the word composite culture as a part of our constitutional law. It means under fundamental duty, it is a duty of every citizen to uplift the composite culture. Okay, so that is what I need to highlight here. If I respect my own culture, I am duty bound to respect the culture of others. Okay, why? Because this is going to give a birth to composite culture. Why we turn to this particular concept? Because in India we had so many religions, we had so many diversities where you will see conflict may arise at any point of time. Okay, so based upon that, what we did, we tried to bring so many things which were in this context. Okay, so 51A part 4 of our constitution talks about composite cultures which reflect so many things. Okay, now see, this is what I'm talking about present. Okay, but present will always talk about, or present can be taken always from the past. If I go to past, you will find, see, we have been experiencing so many different cultures. Okay, if I talk about the rulers, I talk about Aryans, I talk about Dravidians, and after that I talk about the Mughals. Okay, Sufism in the music, or when we talk about Christianity. Okay, there were so many things that were introduced, and you know, they all formed a composite culture. You can you just segregate people by saying okay, this is a group of people, they don't listen Sufi music because they are just bound with bhakti movement, or they are just inclined towards that? No, every person, okay, I assume this particular thing, okay, people love music and they are not limited in accepting the music that is just around themselves, okay, they are ready to accept several things all around, okay. So here one should understand we are duty bound, okay, not by our morals, but we are even duty bound by the laws, okay, which are brought in by the constitution, okay, even though sanction is not there behind that, but every person tries to bring its level based in this context. And that is one of the reason why you will see government also promotes so many things which are related with this culture, okay. Am I audible to you people?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roderick, for your. So that is one of the major thing which I would be talking about. And see, now a question may arise to us: how does this culture develops? How does the composite culture develops? Okay, so I would just say that there are few things we need to follow. Okay, as I've told you, we have certain. I'm little bit outspoken when I talk about the things because I feel that constitution is nothing but something that is related to every human being. Okay. I cannot say constitution is a subject. I always say this thing that we leave our constitution. Okay. What does it exactly means? We leave our constitution. None of the aspect of the constitution has ever been secluded from our life. Okay, when I talk about right of life, that is my own life. When I talk about directive principles of state policy, I always demand something from the state. And not only this thing, when I talk about the governmental system, democracy, see, something that has been taking place or originated from or for the people. Okay, so that's my suprema lex, that is my law of land, that is my mother of all laws. Okay, so what I mean to say here is that even when this has been a part of the constitution, it is our duty to follow that particular thing in such a manner that everyone should get knowledge or everyone should get sensitized towards this particular thing. Okay, but that factor I somewhere feel is missing somewhere. I'm doing my research in this part only, I'm working on fundamental duties, and I come across so many things that are related to this part. Okay, people in our country, the sorrow state is that we are not that conscious about fundamental rights. I don't talk about legal fraternity. Why? Because it's a part of our curriculum and we study that particular part, but I talk about a common man or layman. He is hardly bothered about his fundamental rights. So I feel the fundamental duties are far behind when we talk about this context. Okay, but still, whenever I get a chance, whenever I do my paper presentation, I mostly select this topic because I get a large platform from different ways by which I can just transfer one message ki there is something called as fundamental duties and we are duty bound to follow those particular things. Okay, so that is one of the major thing I would be talking about, and I highlighted certain thing. I felt that I should speak this thing because the theme of the conference itself attracts us a lot when we talk about this thing, and rather than not getting restricted to culture, I thought I will speak on composite culture. Okay, which will strengthen the unity of the nation, which will give the message of positivity which we require at this particular hour, observing the situation of our country. Okay, because it's no one is going to affect by something as much the citizens are going to get affected. Okay, SK Bose sir have also stated that citizens can be considered as the diamond or gems of the nation. Okay, so that is one of the reason how strong we build our character will take the nation to a particular extent. Okay, I have seen most of the time people complain about so many things that are related to this context. Ki this is not happening in the nation, that is not happening in the nation. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, charity begins at home. If I wish that the environment should be clean, if I wish that people should respect my culture, then I should start it from myself. Okay, so this is one of the small message which I feel that I should share with you people, and I should carry on this particular thing in this context. Okay, so that is how I need to highlight these points, and if there are any question which you people need to pose to me, you're free to do that. Okay, so you can just write it in your chat box and I will answer your question in this regard. Are there any questions? Okay, before I conclude with this particular session or end this particular session, once again, I would ask, is Mr. Rahul there? Okay, I think he has not joined the session. Okay, with this, I say thank you so much for your presentation, all the paper presenters for this session. And I would also say that thank you for patience hearing by all the participants of this particular session. Okay, so that is one of the major thing. I would say that I would congratulate all the paper presenters, and I would say that there are wonderful sessions and wonderful presentations which are going on. So thank you so much for inviting me as a chair, and have a wonderful day. Over to you, Roderick Mario.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for your tremendous job that you've given to us.